Hello and welcome to the Six Sales podcast. This is Mike Nicholson from Six Sales. Today we're going to be speaking to Chloe Hawking, who is the CEO of UK and Ireland at Kinesso. Chloe, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Thank you, Mike. I'm great. Great to be here as well.
Good. Lovely to have you here. So just to kick us off, could you maybe tell us a little bit about your first job in media and then bring us up to speed on what's happened since then up to your current role as CEO at Kinesso?
Yeah, of course. Well, my career actually didn't start in media. I started in web and software development. So I was in a business in Australia that was doing app development before the App Store and Apple even existed. So quite a different skill set from the start. But I then started in holistic digital agencies doing CRM, paid search, SEO, so very much digital native from the start. Then moved into media following that and moved over to the UK where I worked for a lot of brilliant media agencies doing campaigns for a lot of amazing brands in the UK and abroad. I went on to lead programmatic at one of the big holding groups and then went into more general management roles in chief digital officer and COO roles. But what I felt was in those more recent years was really a wish to go back to that more holistic thinking approach. And I always find, obviously media agencies, the answer is media because that's what they work in. So when I got the opportunity to take the role at Reprise, I was really excited about the breadth and depth of capabilities because, it wasn't a media agency trying to do content or a content agency trying to do experience. It was very much, a holistic digital performance agency. So I feel like I've kind of gone full circle a little bit in joining Reprise back to my early agency days in Australia. And that's, where I am today.
Okay, lovely. So you've fitted, I'm not sure that's even a word. It doesn't sound right. Quite a lot to your career today. What would you say is the thing that you're most proud of so far?
I think it's quite a hard question, actually. I'm someone who's usually just thinking about what's next and moving forwards. It's probably not that healthy. So I thank you for asking the question to reflect. I think what I'm most proud of is probably a slightly cheesy one, but is, going on to see the careers of people who I've worked in teams with over the years and, seeing people go on to great things. And obviously I've only ever played a small role versus their own hard work and determination. But, having hired those people, perhaps giving them their first roles and then training them up over the years and to see them move on is amazing. I'll give you one example. I've got a brilliant lady I've worked with who I taught her traffic campaigns. She'd never worked in digital. I taught her how to do trafficking. And now she's gone on to be head of media at an amazing global business. And I think, isn't it brilliant? Someone knows how to do trafficking in that role. And I played that small part of helping her learn that. So, I think on the people front, that's probably a big area of pride.
That's a brilliant answer and something that I've been reflecting on recently as well. So I'm 30 years in this industry now, as you can probably tell from the grey hairs. That's why I'm not on camera. I bumped into a guy called Nick, he was a grad of mine when I was at Fullscreen, and then he was head of marketing at a company. And I was like, okay, I feel really old now. And I've got a guest coming on the podcast soon, Lucy Alexander, who works at the Financial Times as head of analytics or something, and she was a grad when I was at the Telegraph. And I think, my goodness, I've been around a long time. But it's amazing, isn't it, where you kind of try and help people the best you can as you go along through sort of your career and life, and then they go on to do great things. You think, oh, good for you. That's
definitely take pride in that.
It's always about the people, isn't it, this industry, if you think about it. I mean, there's lots of brands. You talk about the Lumascape. I was talking to Cara about that before, and there's 1,000 companies on it or whatever, but It's basically about the people. It's the people talking to other people and the relationships that make it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, for all the tech and AI that we talk about, it's the people that make it work or find the value in it or, make it simple and easy to use. So 100% agree with that.
Cool.
Yeah.
So a number of topics to talk to you about today, Chloe. The first one, a subject that's probably quite dear to your heart, is the changing relationship between clients and agencies. I think when I first started, the media agency pretty much did everything. The client just said, there you go, you're in charge, crack on. Probably a slightly more complicated than that, but you get my point. And now we have in-housing and we have so many different tech companies and publishers and goodness knows who else trying to get in front of our clients. And so it's a very different sort of landscape to it was when I started, certainly, and probably changed quite a lot since you started as well. So you're being much younger than me, of course. So what are your views on that in terms of what's changed for the good, maybe what's changed, maybe not for the good, and where we're at?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of change for the good. I'd say mostly change for the good. What I've really loved seeing over the years is that changing profile of senior marketers. More digital skill sets, more data analytics skill sets, making it into those top roles, or people who didn't come from those backgrounds skilling up in those areas as well. And I think that's been super powerful for a lot of transformation organisations. Just that different mindset and approach to marketing coming through. Obviously, with that, there's been some negatives in terms of perhaps an over focus on performance, what we would say performance or bottom funnel.
I would have thought you'd have been really happy about that being a Kinesso.
Well, it depends on your
performance agency,
right? There's good performance, there's bad performance. Okay. I'd say we're more in the good performance space, which I know sounds vague, but. There was a time where I'd say there was bad performance was common practice in the industry, and I think that it hurt a lot of brands. So I think
clicks, you mean that sort of thing?
Yeah. Chasing clicks, poor measurement, vanity metrics, and the like. So I think can change for good and bad there. I think the other area that we're seeing a lot of change, and we're definitely pioneering and leaning into, is the openness to looking at different agency models and partnership structures and remuneration as well. And I think it's fair to say that the traditional agency model needs to evolve to be sustainable. I think there's a lot of focus on deliverables and time rather than outcomes and true value to clients. And that's something that we're definitely changing from the clients we work with. So, we're very much leaning into kind of pay for performance and, increasing the risk for the agency and return for the client. So more win-win partnerships. Okay. And that really is evolving that agency-client relationship from being, supplier-client to genuine business partners.
Okay. So just on that, so on a paid per hour basis, you feel quite safe because if we have to spend 100 hours on this project, then at least we're going to get paid for it. Whereas if you move to we're going to deliver an outcome to you, and it might take us 200 hours or 300 hours, there's the potential downside of you might end up doing more work for less money. But there's also probably an opportunity there as well, right? Because nobody really understands how many hours something might take. And if you're really good at it and quick and slick and optimized and effective, then you could perhaps deliver something that another agency might take 200 hours on in 50 hours, let's say, just pulling numbers out of the air. So it's an opportunity as well as a potential threat, right? Yeah,
I think, the truth is the typical agency models are quite restrictive and they're not always a per hour basis. Usually they're a bit more fixed than that. And therefore they don't always offer the flexibility to upweight and bring in different talent depending on what's needed to achieve the outcomes. And, as I touched on earlier, to perform, you need a little bit of everything. You need some content specialists. You need some, obviously some media specialists, some strategist work, perhaps some on-site experience, intelligence, some tapping into some data analytics skills, and that flexibility is really important. I don't think agency models are always set up to service that. I think in terms of the risk reward element you mentioned, I think it does take a lot of modelling to work out how much opportunity for growth is there for the client and how much risk should the agency take on in delivering that outcome. It's not really about how much time is spent. It's about what are the things we need to do to achieve that growth outcome and how can we have a shared success model where we're both incentivized to do everything we possibly can to get to that outcome. Yeah. And we've seen, phenomenal results working with clients in this way. It really does change that dynamic and is unlocking more growth because there's no restriction on what the agency can do for the client. It's, pulling in any service we can, any capability to be able to hit that ultimate goal rather than focusing on selling time and a fixed scope.
So is there an element then? So there's we talked about the Lumascape and the 1,000 companies. There's probably more than that, but like just as a finger out the air or a number out the air. So is there an element then that ad tech companies and tech companies generally should be thinking about how they can help you do your job quicker, better, faster, so that you can deliver more value to your clients at scale, not just maybe pitching one client, but thinking, right, cool, we can help Kinesso do this much quicker, faster, more efficient, whatever, so that you get better at being able to deliver those projects, that value project and getting paid maybe without having to spend loads and loads of time. Like I'm not
I think
said that very
efficiency is
well, but I
always part of like businesses' focus area. How do we improve our operations over time, find faster ways to do things, automate, refine processes, standardized ways of working? All those things are important to us, and definitely if there's vendors out there that have solutions in that area, we'd love to hear about that. And we're working on a lot of things internally as well. But what I would say is this model is not about spending less time on things. It's about doing a better job to deliver outcomes.
Yeah.
So
but if you can do both, if you can do a better job, and it takes less time.
Even better. But it's not about it's not about playing with reducing time. It's about like unlocking incremental growth.
Sure.
So that's how we're approaching it.
Okay, cool. So another hot topic at the moment is retail media. So I know Kinesso, we didn't even talk about Kinesso. So for those that don't know, do you want to maybe just introduce Kinesso?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, Kinesso is a relatively new brand. So we're the performance and digital arm of IPG Media Brands. We were created officially in November through the combination of 3 businesses, so Reprise, Matterkind, and a legacy organisation called Kinesso, but we used that brand, but it's a completely different organisation now. And, we're servicing cross-media, data and technology, and retail media solutions for IPG Media Brands clients, along with a huge number of direct clients as well. It's a very exciting time as we're, bringing these disciplines together and also developing a huge amount of tech. We've got, I think, 400 people in our tech product team.
Wow.
So, it's, I think, one of the biggest ever performance agency, probably the biggest. Yes, it's quite an exciting future ahead, I think, for us.
Okay. Yeah. And you're pretty much 100% focused on performance.
Yes, performance in the broader sense. So, as I mentioned before, we're not exclusively focused on media. So we've got a third of our business in content, third in media, and a third in experience services. So it's very much that holistic approach. And for us, performance is along the journey. It's not just the last touch areas. When we think about what is performance, it's about consumer centricity, journey-based and experience media and content, and about removing friction along the customer journey.
Okay. Yeah. So one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about is retail media. And I spoke to Nick Ashley from Tesco about that a few episodes ago. And he was saying that he thinks that if you only think about retail media as the last touch, if you like, in store, then you're missing a trick, because it's I think they call it from sofa to store. So there's literally the whole part of marketing can be kind of encompassed, or advertising and branding and awareness and familiarity, and right the way through to purchase. So are you working on retail media clients? Is that something that you're involved in? What's your view of the opportunity or the potential threats? Or
it's a big part of what we do as part of our offering for our clients, and growing, because obviously the opportunities are growing in that space. So loads of opportunities and a few challenges intertwined. So I'll talk a bit about both. From an opportunity perspective, I think for like endemic and non-endemic clients, there is huge opportunity for full funnel marketing in retail environments and using retail media data assets. As Nick said, I definitely agree with that. I think some of the challenges that we're seeing in unlocking that opportunity is some silos in client organizations sometimes between trade and marketing. And often trade is seen as the ones that own the retail partnerships naturally and the budget related to that. And marketing, therefore, sometimes a little bit cognizant of going into that space. And likewise, obviously a lot of marketers are working with many retailers, and they believe if they invest further upper funnel with a single retailer, that they're kind of favouring that particular, channel for sales. So when we see clients bring those two parts of the organisation to better in the budgets and plan them in a cohesive way, we see much better results. Another challenge that we're seeing, which is just a reflection of where the industry is at in retail media, but there's a lot of inconsistency and lack of standards in the area of retail. There's a huge number of retail media networks becoming available in the marketplace, which is really exciting. We're helping a lot of clients build their own retail media networks. But because it's still relatively new, there's a lot of inconsistency around measurement, around audience definition, and that's making it quite hard to plan and activate across the number of retail media vendors there are out there. We're doing a lot, as I mentioned, we've got quite a big tech team, so we're doing a lot in that space to bring together the opportunities. So we refer to it as unified commerce and unified retail, and we're building a platform to make it simpler to be able to plan across those distinct partners that exist. But you mentioned about full funnel, so I just wanted to touch on that as well. I think that is a common misconception about retail media, that it is, because of the closed loop measurement environment, that it is all about getting that sale on the platform. But that's really missing a trick, because obviously look at the reach these platforms have, the data they have, and some of the assets. If you think about Amazon with Amazon Prime, like these are, really premium, impressive opportunities for brands to engage with clients in a similar way to linear TV or any other above the line area. So I think there is that misconception is holding back a lot of brands from entering that space. I think there's still more opportunity.
It's full funnel and also omnichannel as well, right? So because this Nick Ashley was talking about from sofa to store, and what he was basically talking about is it's possible, Tesco in particular, and I know there's other stores are available, but they've got data on 21 million of the 26 million or 28 million households in the UK, which is a pretty big footprint. And then you can use that data through a DSP, let's say, to buy
100%.
CTV, mobile, digital audio, outdoor, everything on your way to the store and then actually in the store, and then find out if people bought, right? So it's quite exciting. You're saying there's a lot of complexity.
Yeah.
And
a little bit exactly.
It's not quite as easy as we make it. So,
it's getting better, obviously, as some of these partners, retail partners, integrate with single DSPs and things like that. I think the data side of it's super interesting. Tesco and other big retailers are really investing in, they've always been great at understanding their customers, but really enriching their data sets. And there's huge value in the insights they have about their audiences, and it can be relevant to so many brands, whether you're selling in those retailers or not. So I'm quite excited about the possibility, and we're continuing to explore more opportunities for our clients and experiment in the space.
Cool. Sounds good. Watch this space. So trying to segue from retail media into MFA. So how do we make sure that the money we spend in retail media, I'm really stretching here, is on quality media and not perhaps bad quality media? So there's been a big uplift in the number of people talking about MFA in the last month or so, I would say. One of the things that I think is become fairly evident is that not everybody understands MFA to be the same thing. We don't have a unified definition of what that is. And in fact, if indeed that is bad, MFA, if it performs, let's say, and I'm going to come into that with you, then is it so bad? If you're a performance agency looking for performance and it performs, then you'd think, well, no harm, no foul. But so I guess my question to unpack all of that is, how do you define an MFA site? Do you see any value for them on the media plan, and what does that look like?
Yeah. So I give the broad definition, which I'm sure that hopefully most listeners already know about, but, made for advertising websites are those that usually high ad clutter, so a high ad to content ratio, typically poor design, poor and overall poor user experience and poor content. There are a number of other characteristics that the trade bodies have, identified that typically would be attributes of a made for advertising website. But I think you hit the nail on the head. There isn't really a very specific definition at this point. There's some, helpful characteristics, but there's not very clear thresholds and levels for what should be classified and what shouldn't, and therefore there is a spectrum of obviously made for advertising and then just not great user experience and have a lot of ads on them but could perform. And I think that's where some of the challenges are in determining what works and what doesn't. I think the first thing as an industry we need to is start to get to that more specific common definition, at least of what is on the far right of that spectrum. Like all things viewability and other, I'm sure we will get to a standard that we all agree to. But I think beyond that, it really is about looking at it on client by client basis and working out what is performing and what's not. And first part of what's performing is obviously making sure you've got metrics that make sense. If it's last touch attribution, then it's probably going to look like it performs, unless it's fraud. But if you've got more incrementality orientated measurement, you might be actually see is it driving an uplift. And just on that, I think I could safely say that some of the websites I do go to are definitely made for advertising, but I still use them.
Okay.
So some of my recipe websites that I go to, I painfully look at them on a mobile device, and they're constantly refreshing, and there's ads everywhere. The ad to content ratio is appalling, but I still do go to them. So I think we need to define the reasons why, when we want to be present, when we're not. I think the other things we have to think about is, our industry's ambition for sustainability. I think they are contributing in a negative way to carbon footprint with the number of ad loads and refreshes. So that is another consideration in how we decide what sites should appear on a site list for a client.
Yeah.
But what we are finding as well is, obviously we're working with a number of verification partners to build our inclusion list for clients and decide what goes on that list and what doesn't. But what we find is when we optimize towards the other verification metrics like fraud, away from fraud, towards attention, away from carbon emissions, you actually end up reducing a lot of that exposure to MFA ads naturally. So I think some of the practices we have developed over the past years have protected brands from some of that exposure, but there's still more to be done, and that is the role of an agency to do that curation and work out where the ads should run and where they shouldn't.
Yeah. So you've got the sales off the back of a campaign, let's say, that you can use as a measurement. But I was going to ask you mentioned attention there as well, and I'm wondering if MFA sites, when we do finally understand exactly what we mean by that, can be run through some of the eye tracking vendors to see when somebody lands on that page, what do they do? Do they? Because if you've got 10 ads on a page, with every ad you add, well, that was a tongue twister. You're going to get less attention on each ad, right? So you've got what I would call premium publishers, such as my old employer, The Telegraph, where they're going down to one ad per page and making it bigger and better and more partnership-led. And then you've got, on the other end of the spectrum, maybe your cookery site that you mentioned, where there's ads everywhere and you don't know where to look. It's like trying to drive in America. Have you ever tried to drive in America? Exactly. There's so much outdoor. Yeah. You can't actually see the signs. You're looking for a road sign. You're like, I'm just being advertised to death here.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was a little segue. But so could attention help us to understand if there's any value to these sites, i.e., people bounce, they spend 3 seconds there and they didn't look at any of the ads. It was clickbait that got them there. They realized when they got there that they'd been duped and they left and nothing happened. Yeah,
exactly. I think there's obviously on that spectrum, the far left, which is your telegraphs, and there's some in the middle and some further to the right. And it's about determining, using these monitoring tools, the attention partners and optimization metrics, optimization algorithms to weed out some of those high ad clutter, low load time websites. So I think some of the best practices get us some of the way, but there is still a risk of exposure. And, we've got to keep working at it.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. So it would be remiss of me not to mention AI because,
yes,
everyone does. So what I'm really interested in, Chloe, is how are you actually using AI today and what do you think the opportunity will be in the future? Because there's a lot of hype, there's a lot of talk, there's some amazing progress been made in the recent years, but it's still, for me looking out, I don't know, I work with it day to day, it still feels a little bit unreliable and perhaps not as good as it will be. Certainly, I think that's fair to say. So how is AI helping you today, and how do you think it will help you tomorrow?
Yeah, I thought you might ask about AI, as you said. It's the question on everyone's lips. It's no doubt an exciting time, and we're seeing so many applications for AI, from the mundane day-to-day tasks to quite transformational performance solutions. And some of the key use cases are coming through relate to research and planning, audience definition, and obviously creativity, I will say. I think thankfully, as you know, if you've been working in digital media, we've been using AI for a long time. We just didn't call it AI. And a lot of the buying platforms we're using, have evolved from ML to AI over the years. So I think everyone's finally relabeled everything to be AI, and, at the likes of Meta and Google, have incredible investment in that space for lots of areas of their organization. So I think it's been more commonplace than perhaps we realised, obviously, until everything was relabeled. But in terms of how we're using it, I think we were quite lucky because our leadership saw value in this several years ago and hired a chief AI officer who is absolutely brilliant, has been piloting new capabilities for us over the years. Whether that's around writing ad copy for search ads or, reviewing content for a website to check for quality.
So just digging into that, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So writing copy for search ads. So is the process there that it researches other like-minded products and then looks at search terms and then comes back and tries to basically more sophisticated than this, I hope, but keyword stuff, some copy to be correct? Is that essentially what it's doing?
Yeah. I mean, this was several years ago. This was 3 years ago. Obviously now this was before ChatGPT was widely available. So now, this seems more normal that we could do this. But yeah, it was scraping the websites of clients as well as looking at the keyword lists that keywords that were high volume or high importance. And you would input these and it would create copy for you. Obviously, you still need a human revision. You would obviously have still approval from clients, but a much more efficient way to develop ad copy. And now, obviously, within AdWords, there's dynamic search ads which can do elements of this for you, and their AI solutions are quite fast paced. But these are the types of pilots that we were doing a few years ago. So it's quite small things like that through to changing our approach to planning and, importing more data sets to be able to inform planning and revenue forecasting for clients. Those vast data sets that it would be really difficult for a human to try and process and build models through. AI is very powerful for that. So, there's some big developments in that space for us.
So taking AI hallucination into consideration,
yes.
So obviously crunching the data in the first place is much, much quicker with AI and will probably one day become foolproof, but it's not yet probably. So how much additional work is needed from a human standpoint to make sure that what comes back makes sense and looks like it's right? Because I was talking to a guest recently, and I've spoken to a few people about this. The problem with generative AI is it hallucinates badly. It can give you what looks like an amazing output, but it's completely wrong. But it looks trustworthy. And then if you don't know it's wrong, if a human doesn't look at it and go, well, that's not right, then they can publish that.
Yeah.
Which then means it's open for AI to look at that in the future and go, oh, well, that's correct. And so we end up with this cycle of crap, basically, where AI is feeding off its own rubbish. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. From my perspective, I think one big part of addressing that is controlling the data inputs. So obviously with the AI solutions we're building, they're all in an infrastructure where we're putting in specific brand data. It's not generative off, the sources that we're not trusting are useful for the process. The other thing is, we've always had that role as agencies to interrogate the data and the trends that we're seeing. And, I can still remember many times going through campaign results going like, what really drove that performance though? Someone would be like, oh, it's because it was, there was a sale that day. And it's like, no, it's because, all the competitors were offline that day. You always have to have that context of what's going on. So I think that is the role of the agency teams. Obviously there's AI, we can overlay on the AI about looking at anomalies and cross-checking for hallucinations and things like that. But I think that the human element on top is absolutely essential for really having a critical eye on, does that make sense based on what we've seen in the past, rather than just trusting that the AI's worked it all out.
Yeah, I think we'll probably get to the time, won't we, where you can ask AI to do something and it'll come back with the answer and it'll always be right because it'll have figured out how to do that, but it's not there yet.
Yeah.
Another interesting, so one of the use cases I found really useful with ChatGPT is I trained our own version of ChatGPT to basically look at a website and answer the 6 questions that I think are important about a business before I'd have a meeting with them or whatever. So who are they? What do they do? Who do they do it with? How do they do it? why should I care? And it was really good at doing that, and it still is. But what I've noticed is that there are more and more websites that are blocking AI crawlers, if that's the right term. I think robots is actually the right term, but they're basically stopping AI from being able to look at its content because they're worried about their IP being stolen. So that's a threat and an opportunity, right? Because the threat to the publisher, let's say, is I don't want AI taking my content and then giving it to somebody and I'm not getting anything for it. But also there's a huge search use case for AI, and I use it probably more for search than anything else. Is like, okay, go look at the internet and find me 8 articles about X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
So you might not have sort of come across this from your sort of side of media, but like, do you think that's, how would you think about that? Is that more of a threat, allowing AI to look at your site, or is it more of an opportunity?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's natural that anyone with really good quality and valuable content would want to protect that content. That's why we have, gated content on websites. It's valuable, and
to get your email address.
Well, that too, and some money. But it's valuable content at the end of the day. So I get the protections, and I think especially while regulation isn't really there around copyright and protecting the root source of content, I would be nervous as well if I was effectively a publisher. But I think, we're all wading through and learning through this together. And I think that, there's going to be increased protections. And I think from our perspective, we're working very close with our general counsel to make sure that we're doing the right thing and like really triangulating all the considerations and risks that come with AI, whether it's around copyright or regulation or, ethics and bias or even sustainability, because it's hugely not just expensive, but also, carbon emitting to manage and process this much data. So I think that, these are all the considerations we're going to have to work through and just try and do the right thing and be respectful of the traditional rights of publishers or whoever it might be when it comes to using the data.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting space, and it'd be interesting to see how it plays out. So, Chloe, what does an agency CEO do of a day, week, month? What's on your plate at the moment? What are the sort of big challenges and opportunities that you're kind of looking at?
Yeah. Not every day is having a nice chat on a podcast, to say that much. This is a nice change.
You're always welcome anytime.
Thank you. It might be my new thing to do once a month, perhaps. I think for me at the moment, a big focus is, as I mentioned, Kinesso is a new entity. We've brought 3 amazing businesses together into one. Change takes time to do, but I feel like we've gone through that part of the process now. And now it's about realising the benefits. So the benefits for our clients, so in terms of having more holistic performance solutions across those areas, and the benefits for our teams as well in terms of enabling them to learn new areas. So 2024 for me is very much focused on realising that vision that Kinesso was set out to achieve. But beyond that,
do the other brands still exist in their own right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So you've spoken to Cara, an initiative, amazing integrated agencies. We partner with them as well to provide some services. And there's some other areas that we particularly specialise in. We're doing web development, we're doing CRM, we're doing, affiliates and retail media. So some very distinct specialist areas that it doesn't necessarily make sense to have living in several agencies. You want to incubate and have a central capability. So, yeah, they very much still exist and an important part of our network. Beyond really making sure we deliver on the Kinesso vision, obviously my role is to focus on the now and in-year results, but also have an eye to the future and looking at what's coming around the corner and thinking about those unknowns that are very apparent, whether it's related to, as mentioned, regulation and how that's going to impact us, or our partners, which will in turn impact us, or whether it's around, some of the points we talked about, AI, what's going to be the implications of cookieless, what do we need to, how do we need to supporting our talent for the coming years? If, AI is playing a bigger role, how do we make sure we're reskilling our teams? For me, it's always keeping that one eye on what do we need to do this year to deliver for our clients and our people, and then what do we need to be thinking about and preparing for the coming years.
And just to give us a little bit of insight, how do you figure out what's coming next? Because nobody really actually knows that, right? So how do you sort of horizon scan, for want of a better term, to sort of try and figure out what the trends are going to be in the future?
Yeah, I think, we're definitely not trying to do 10-year plans at this point. I think a 3-year plan feels sensible. But I think it's a lot of it is monitoring and keeping an eye on what's happening. I think we've got the right people in the right industry bodies, for example, as a starting point. A lot of conversations with clients and other agency partners about what's, what they're experiencing, what are some of the risks that they're seeing come up. I think keeping an eye on other industries as well, because often, we are a very progressive industry, but often other industries are actually moving faster in some areas. If they've got high use of AI, they're introducing more standards and regulation about how it's used. So, for example, if we look at, players like Meta, they're absolutely brilliant with the documentation of AI. And I think as agencies, we can learn a lot from that because, they're highly regulated areas. But I think any business that's starting to use AI a lot will have that expectation around documentation and self-regulation of how they're using AI. So it's always kind of keeping an eye on what other industries, other businesses are having to do, and or needing to challenges that they're coming up against, and thinking could that happen to us, or is that an opportunity for us on the positive side?
So that's looking outward to try and figure out what's coming next. Is there an element of listening to the questions you're being asked by clients as well, and how they change over time? Is that kind of a part of it?
Yeah, 100%. That's usually the first. That's very much in the now in terms of some of the challenges they're facing. So the clients' questions that we're kind of addressing now are around how can we help them on their automation journey? How do we bring media and creative closer together, and what role does AI play in that? How should they structure their organisations given the broad capabilities needed to succeed? What should they have in-house versus what should they be in an agency? So they're all very current questions, but I think they'll continue to change the shape of our industry and our particular agency over the next 3 years as we address those questions with an eye to how will this play out over the next few years.
You almost need an AI to flag, hang on a minute, we've just got a question we've not had before. We need to look at that a little bit more, put it on a whiteboard somewhere, go, right, why have we not had this question before? Is this a sign of things to come?
I like that. I did see
the alert goes off in the corner,
Yeah. 100%.
New question.
I did read an article about, CEOs being replaced by AI at some point. So I'm also got an eye to the future of, okay, what areas should I be replacing my current job with AI, and while still making sure I've got a job in the future.
Yeah. I was thinking about that just this morning, actually. My daughter's at university, and she has to obviously submit work, and they have tech now that scans the work that's put in and checks it against the internet to make sure it's not plagiarized, and checks that it hasn't been created by the likes of ChatGPT. Which makes sense to me. You can't possibly get a degree based on what ChatGPT or others say. That makes sense. However, if Gen AI is in our future, wouldn't it be better not to ban it, but to show people how to use it alongside their original thinking and creative writing, rather than just say you can't use it at all?
100%.
I remember when I was a kid, you couldn't use calculators. I was like, but that's mad, because if I was in the real world, I'd use the calculator.
Totally. Yeah. And when I was in university, it was like, do you use Google to find out your information, or do you read the books? I think there's that quote, you won't be replaced by AI, it will be replaced by someone using AI.
Yeah.
And I think we'd be holding people back if we don't teach them how to use it effectively. But at the same time, we need to do it in a way that people are still using their minds and not,
for sure.
Adding value. I think there's nothing worse than reading an article or an email that clearly someone has used AI to read and they haven't bothered to really go through it.
As soon as I clocked that, I stopped reading. As soon as I realised that this has just been spat out of a Gen AI tool, I was like, okay, I'm done. And you can tell usually by the style.
Yeah, 100%. It's a very formulaic way that the AI responds. So, or ChatGPT anyway. I think there's always going to be people who are able to use it and do well with it, and people who use it and it's going to be quite obvious and it's not going to serve them well. Yeah. So, it's an interesting time to be a student, I guess, for your daughter. Yeah. But
it's like, I mean, this is going off topic slightly, I suppose. But even things like, if Charlotte wanted to quote somebody, that would be a percentage of plagiarism, because that quote already exists somewhere. So it's scanned and gone. Crazy. So you're allowed, I think, something like 20% can be somewhere else on the internet, but everything else has to be completely original. But eventually we're going to run out of
original ideas. Quote yourself.
That's bound to have been written somewhere.
Yeah, 100%.
Anyway. 100%. So just to finish off, Chloe, can you tell us, and you can interpret this question however you want, so it can be personal, industry, whatever, what are you most excited about for the future?
Oh, that's a big question. Well, now you've gone the personal route. I'm like much more excited about some of those things. But no, I think on the professional front, I am really excited, and this is a bit nerdy, but I'm really excited about the change in commercial models. I haven't worked in agency my entire career. I don't think we've ever really nailed how to get that agency-client relationship and remuneration model in a place that it really allows both sides to succeed. So I'm personally really excited about that, and I probably talk about it way too much, but I'm very keen on it. And then, on the personal side, I think...
Does that make pitch... Sorry, just to jump in there. Does that make pitches a lot more consultative? So you have to kind of really try and figure out what the client needs, actually needs, rather than this is the suite of products and services that we offer, and then go away and figure out how you can make that happen and figure out what you think you might need to invest in it from its money, time, resource sort of point of view, and then go back and say, right, we can deliver that and this is what it will cost.
100%. It's so much more consultative and collaborative in the way you get to what the model should be. And even on a yearly basis, that piece around negotiating what should the remuneration model be this year is all based on how much growth, headroom for growth is there, what are the other categories, what's else happening in the category, what's your promotion schedule like, and you're really getting into the depths of what is the overall client business plans for the year, which is much, I think, a more interesting conversation for an agency and client to be having rather than how much you're going to spend.
Yeah. It also makes it much easier for you to get a fair price for your work, right? Because if you can put a revenue figure on what the project's going to end up delivering, and you're down here and the revenue's up here, then it's much easier for the client to go, okay, I can sign off on that, because if you're going to deliver that, then you're worth that.
Yeah, it's all about ROI.
It's like, oh no, we're going to take 100 hours and it's going to take this long and whatever. Whereas it's when there's a revenue number attributed to it, then it's easier to then maybe increase your fee to what you'd said it would probably should have always been along. Yeah.
I think there's lots of industries that work in this way. Again, talking about taking inspiration from other industries, the insurance industry is all about brokers, and they're very used to paying 30-35% of their sales to the broker. And the broker's obviously doing marketing, they're doing lead generation, lead nurture, sales, a lot of things that agencies do. They don't handle the final sale, but they do all the other elements. But it's a very different model to what we're used to. So I think there is a lot of headroom to change that thinking. I think in very commercial organisations, it can be very appealing. It does get me quite excited for the future.
Awesome. Chloe, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Of course.
Thank you very much for being on the Six Hills podcast.
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you very much, Mike.